March Madness.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Flop Warding, a very special Women's Wednesday edition of the pod. I'm Riley Woodall, joined by Zion Brown and Owen Graham. Leah Blosser, our producer, in the studio. We are down to the nitty-gritty. The field is set for the Final Four. South Carolina, NC State, Iowa, and UConn. Wow, what a tournament. So much to talk about, guys.
Dude, it has been such a joy watching this tournament unfold, and especially this last week. You know, the first weekend of the women's tournament, you might get a decent upset here or there, but with the home court advantage being a factor, you know, it's harder for those lower seeded teams to really make it to the Sweet 16. But now you have the two regional sites in Albany and in Portland, and everybody was kind of on neutral ground, and we got some really good basketball this past weekend.
Yeah, it especially with that like one night with Iowa and LSU and then USC and UConn right after that.
Whew.
Like that is probably the best night of women's college basketball you could ask for. And it was, you know, it didn't disappoint. It was two great games, four really good teams that ultimately two had to come out on top, and definitely a lot to talk about here in this episode.
A couple of these teams have had to grind out victories. Others have just breezed past lesser competition. So we're going to get into it. Gentlemen, what are your immediate reactions to these four teams and their pass to the Final Four? Zion, I'm going to go to you first.
Which team do you want me to start with?
We will start. So what we'll do is we'll start with South Carolina, go all the way down the line, and then proceed the same way with NC State, Iowa, and UConn.
Okay, good. So I'll start with the Gamecocks. I was in attendance for their Sweet 16 game against IU, and that was one where it looked like, okay, South Carolina again is going to have their third blowout of the NCAA tournament. They're going to get by Indiana. It was a 22-point game. Then all of a sudden, the Hoosiers started making more threes, and South Carolina's offense stalled out, and the minute left, it was a 2-point game. And it was just a crazy game. And shout out to Raven Johnson. I know our former student and friend, not former friend, still friend, Evan Gerke.
Former friend.
Evan Gerke wrote about this. But
we love you, Evan. You're amazing.
Last year around this time in the Final Four, Raven Johnson went viral when Caitlin Clark was guarding her, and Clark literally just like turned her back to Raven Johnson on the perimeter because she was such a non-threat from three. This year, she's still not an incredible shooter. She was at 32% coming into that Indiana game, but she is somebody who can confidently take those shots, and that is all the difference. She hit that three to make it a 5-point game. Indiana couldn't come back, so shout out to her, keeping her Gamecock season alive, keeping them undefeated as they went on, of course, and beat Oregon State 2 days later. A really impressive weekend from them. Those are two good teams they played in, Indiana and Oregon State, and they both stayed in the game for a long time. And so South Carolina just showed that DNA, that undefeated DNA, that team that has been to the Final Four the last few years, and they showed why they are undefeated and such a great team.
Yeah, right now I don't have any notes on South Carolina just because that's how confident I am with how well they're going to do. Because in all honesty, NC State, I feel like they've just kind of been a little under the radar, especially with that region, but they've deserved all the hype. They faced Tennessee, they beat them, and then they come over and beat the number 1 seed Texas in that region. But I just can't, you can't bet against South Carolina right now with how much of a roll they're on. They definitely had some trouble against Indiana, and there was some times where you could have thought, okay, maybe the Hoosiers are going to pull this one out, but you come back, you get your win against Oregon State, pretty much dominate the whole game. You have all the momentum going into the Final Four. So, I mean, for me, I just think they have the roster. This is their year to do it, and I think they get there.
Real quickly, just some notes on South Carolina that I have. They've beaten 3 of the 4 teams they've faced by 12 points or more, and this is supposed to be the cream of the crop if you make the NCAA tournament, and they've just waxed them, except for Indiana, of course, in that game. Obviously, very, very emotional, bringing out a lot of passion and love, and just a great Hoosier season that came to an end. They almost pulled it off, but just not quite. You mentioned it, Zion. South Carolina made those winning plays down the stretch that have made them undefeated this entire season. Versus Oregon State, they out-rebounded the Beavers 51-37, 22-7 offensively, and they forced 12 turnovers. The biggest thing, too, for me, the Beavers only took 12 shots that weren't threes. They took 8 threes. and it was 20 shots or rather 20 shots total that they made. They only made 12 shots that weren't threes, which just speaks to the paint presence that this team has. So we'll move on to the team that they're going to face in the Final Four in NC State. Owen, I'm going to you first.
Yeah.
On State College.
Yeah, like I just said, I feel like they've flown a little bit under the radar this tournament. Maybe not a team that many were expecting to make it as far as they did, especially with Texas in that region. Of course, Madison Booker and that Texas-led team just had their struggles, and NC State ultimately came out on top. But, I mean, I think when you look back on the regular season, they definitely have the ability to maybe shock some people. They're 7-3 against the top 25 in the regular season. 2 of those wins, I believe, was number 3 Colorado at that time, which Colorado had a less than perfect.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, less than perfect finish to the season. But another one of those wins was against number 2 UConn. So I mean,
yeah,
they can compete. They're a competitive team. Isaiah James, 16.7 points per game. She is their leader in all facets of the game. Like I said, it's tough. It's really tough to just go ahead and say, yeah, they're going to beat South Carolina. But I am curious to see if it's at least close. I think it is close. But credit to the Wolfpack. They've had a good tournament so far and flown a little bit under the radar. I don't think, like I said, many people expected them to make it this far. But hey, a Final Four appearance. Can't complain.
Yeah, this is supposed to be a down year for them. They didn't come into the season ranked. They had those 2, miraculous 2021 and 2022 seasons that I think the 2021 season ended in the Elite Eight, and then 2022, 2 years ago, they were the 1 seed, and Paige Beckers happened. So that's what happened then in the Elite Eight too. So they finally get to the Final Four under Wes Moore. Congrats to him. And this just really did come out of nowhere this whole season. And even as they played much better than we expected to them this season, they still were a team for me I didn't look at as a Final Four team. So kudos to them, credit to them, because they defend their butts off, and they were able to take down the number 1 and 2 seeds in that region to get to Cleveland.
Yeah, they beat Stanford and Texas both by 10 points. They hit 7 threes against the Cardinal, 9 threes versus the Longhorns, which was good because they got out-rebounded pretty badly in both those games, particularly in the Texas game. And those were some teams that, even though they out-rebounded the Wolfpack, just couldn't really capitalize on those opportunities. And NC State proven, they can really knock them down from deep. They're a threat that, kind of what you were saying, Owen, you don't want to underestimate this team at all. It's going to be an interesting matchup to see them face off against South Carolina. I don't know of the 4 teams left, the 3 that aren't South Carolina, if they're the one that can get it done, but it's March. Anything can happen. We'll move on to the 3rd team we're going to talk about today in the Final Four, the Iowa Hawkeyes, who I'll start with kind of my little story on them. They beat a very good Colorado team. Mind you, they kind of downshifted towards the tail end of the season, but they beat a good Colorado team by 21 points. They got the 94-87 win over LSU, most watched women's basketball game in history, which congratulations to all those women. They've earned it and worked so incredibly hard. That's great to see how far women's basketball has come. But won 94-87 over LSU. They hit 13 threes. Caitlin Clark just took over in the second half, and I'll let one of you 2 gentlemen talk about her stat line because you guys got that in your points. But Iowa got out-rebounded 54-36, 23-6 on the offensive glass, and got out-blocked by LSU 6-3. But LSU was 34 of 88 from the field. They were not able to capitalize enough on their second chance opportunities. They couldn't stop Caitlin Clark in the second half. And, again, those extra possessions, those extra opportunities that they were getting, they just, couldn't score. And that was ultimately the difference in that game.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that more because we have a segment called Flop of the Week, and that's kind of what I want to highlight on. But
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But, I mean, here's my thing about Caitlin Clark's stat line. 41 points is good when you look at it, but she shot like 40% from the field. I think she shot
about 45%.
Yeah.
44.8.
Like it was 14 of something. You have
13 of 29.
13 of 29. that's good when you get 41 points, but it's a little inefficient. But hey,
but
it's also.
But 20 of those shots are threes, which are, as you know, Owen, are much more efficient. So she's 9 of 20 from deep. That's incredible to hit 9 threes on 45%.
Here's the other thing I will say is these two teams were going to their playmakers in the late stages. Caitlin Clark outperformed, I would argue, the playmaker on the other side in LSU and Angel Reese in those third and fourth quarters. Yes. And I mean, that you have to rely on your star power, and you have to have a player that can make those big time shots in the absolute most critical moments of games. Caitlin Clark was able to do that.
That's fair. And she definitely had a better second half than the first. I'll give her that.
She had a very, very inefficient first half.
Yes.
I will agree with you.
The first half, it was the tale of two halves for her. But I got to give credit to Iowa as a team, because this LSU roster they faced was very tough. And I think we were having a conversation a few days ago where this Iowa team is maybe a little bit worse than last year's team. Mm-hmm. So I think, Caitlin Clark does her thing. You have a good supporting cast. You do the best thing that you can do and come out away with a win against the national championship kind of rematch in that game. Again, as we'll mention, LSU maybe underperformed in that game as well, but ultimately I still think you got to give the credit to the Hawkeyes and Caitlin Clark doing her thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story of this game. You mentioned it. Not the greatest first half for her as far as efficiency-wise. I think she still had 18 or 20 at halftime, but the efficiency wasn't great. But then that's
an off half for her.
But then that third quarter, it is when everything flipped. She came out of halftime and she was like, I'm just going to abuse him. And there was absolutely nothing LSU could do. I know it was debated and kind of argued about Kim Mulkey, how many more adjustments she could have made, switching the way you defended her, who you guarding her with. I think you're going to get to that a little bit later, Owen. Yep. So I won't go too deep into it, but it doesn't matter. It's Caitlin Clark. It's the best player in college basketball, and she showed it for another time to get back to the Final Four, taking this Iowa program to back-to-back Final Fours. This was a great game. It lived up to the hype. I do wish it would have been a little more like down to the wire than it was.
Yeah.
By around the 3 or 4 minute mark of the fourth quarter, you're like, okay, unless something ridiculous happens, Iowa's got this.
Yeah.
But still, those first 36 minutes were really entertaining and fun to watch.
Yeah, you were on the edge of your seat. We'll move on to the last team in the Final Four here in the 2024 Women's College March Madness Tournament, UConn, a program that is very, very familiar with this spot in time. Zion, I'm going to go to you first on the Huskies.
Well, I mean, Riley, they just broke their 1-year drought of not making the Final Four. Like,
it's
been forever. I can't even remember watching UConn play in the Final Four.
Water reserves have been running low this past year. All right.
I mean, yeah, this game and this team, so impressive what they've done. Only really having 7 players available with all the injuries and everything else they've had, and to get back to the Final Four, they're playing a USC team that was the number 1 seed in that region. And I got to give it to Paige Becker. She was she got my game ball last week. Won't give it to her this week. I don't want to get back to back, but me and Hayden both gave her the game ball last week, and she deserves it again. What I like about Paige Beckers is that she doesn't force the issue like Caitlin Clark. Not that there's anything wrong with the way Caitlin Clark plays, but she doesn't come out gunning in the way that Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, 40 minutes is going to gun no matter what.
Yep.
Paige Beckers kind of just waits it out, feels it out. And then you get to about the middle of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, and she's just like, all right, this is my game.
Let's the game come to her.
This is my time. And she really steps up and shows it. And it was so impressive watching her do that in this game against USC. We saw her do it in the round of 32 against Syracuse. Very similar kind of mindset and attribute, like, okay, I'm going to wait to take this game over. And then guess what? For most of the second half, she guarded Juju Watkins.
Yep.
Like, that is actually ridiculous to play as much as she did in that game. For Paige Beckers to play that much and then say, I can take on the challenge of guarding the best player on the other team. It was a joy to watch.
Well, speaking of, you make a couple really good points. That kind of ties into the point that I'm going to make. This team is really, really good, even though they're banged up and they're injured. And that's something that we'll get into a little bit later in the pod. But man, this team is really, really good. When I was watching that game, it was clear to me down the stretch that there was an experience gap between an experienced and older Huskies teams and a younger USC Trojans team. UConn had players that hit clutch shots, particularly Beckers, in very, very critical situations. And I really felt like down the stretch, USC and Juju Watkins were kind of making some freshman, sophomore, underclassmen mistakes They were forcing shots. I think they hurried their possessions a little bit too much. They got a little bit rattled when they could have just slowed the game down. There were a lot of times where they had a possession where they could tie or take the lead. It wasn't like they were down by 7 points. They were down by 2, 3 points. And they ran down and not even 5 seconds into the possession, chucked up a contested 3. And that's not what's going to win you basketball games down the stretch. UConn also 17 of 10 on the assist side of things. I think that's an aspect of Juju Watkins' game that I think we're going to see develop really, really nicely the next couple seasons. And that's the one thing, in my opinion, that she just needs to fix and correct. It's a very nitpicky thing, but if she's able to, be an assistant and dish the ball to more playmakers too, man, she's already so special as a freshman anyway. She's going to be even greater when she's able to accomplish that.
By the way, I want to piggyback off of part of what you're saying. They're not about Juju, but about the team as USC, like you said, kind of chucking up these bad threes, these bad shots. I want to pat myself on the back because last week when we previewed the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, I picked UConn to win this game.
Yes, you did.
Because I said, no offense to Lindsey Gottlieb. She's a good coach, and she's done a great job getting great talent into USC. They're going to come to the Big Ten next year and be great. But I said, I just can't get myself to pick Lindsey Gottlieb to win a game, an Elite Eight game, over Gino Auriemma. And to me, what you explained there with the bad shots they were taking, that's coaching, right?
Sure.
That's one coach knowing, hey, guys, we have to stay calm. We have to do this, and that. And another coach that, great coach, once again, and knows those things, but couldn't necessarily maybe relay that to her squad in that moment. And it's a younger team, so I get it. But I do just want to say, I feel like it's a coaching thing. And I feel like we saw in this game, Gino Auriemma was the better coach.
Shout out to Zion Brown, man. Hey, that's a good little prediction you got there.
I will say, imagine this UConn team with Azzi Fudd.
Oh, my goodness.
That would give Iowa fits. I mean, that game's already going to be pretty good. But if she was on that team, she was healthy. She had a healthy season. Of course, she went down early on playing.
Or Aubrey Griffin.
Aubrey Griffin. Or just playing 2 games, and I think she went down with an ACL tear.
Yes.
She's special too. And if she was on this team, I mean, that would be my pick if she was still around to take the national championship. But you can't reminisce on that. But even so, it's going to be a good matchup between Beckers and Clark in the Final Four.
Well, I'm going to go back to you, Owen, on this one. It's segment 2. We got game balls to hand out of the Elite Eight. Owen, who you got?
Yeah, so this one might come as a little bit of a shock maybe to you guys, but I think it still has to be recognized. Angel Reese played her butt off in that game. 17 points. The first half especially. 20 boards for her team, 4 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, in what I have, this should be her last collegiate game. We now know that's confirmed.
With declared
2 hours ago, I think.
Her Vogue magazine.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool. I'll say that myself.
Man. That's really
and
awesome.
Imagine how long that was in the works, because she's been keeping it in.
Yeah.
And, she probably did that shoot weeks, maybe months ago, and had to just kind of keep it in. And so did the people at Vogue. So credit to everybody for not letting that get out.
Yeah, but even so, I think she was my kind of game ball to give to LSU, even with that loss. I think that was the right way for her to go out in that game with that effort, especially 20 boards. She dominated the glass. Of course, we'll go into that next segment, how, it didn't really go their way even with that. But still, Angel Reese, she leaves NCAA women's college basketball in that game, and definitely a prominent figure in the space. And I can't wait to see her play in the WNBA.
And had a very, very emotional post-game press conference speaking on all the adversity that she's faced ever since LSU won that national championship game a year ago. Just such a special player that is going to dominate, by the way, in the WNBA. Really excited to see her play. I'll give my 2 out real quickly. It's Paige Beckers and Aaliyah Edwards. Beckers, 28 points, 10 rebounds, double-double for her, 6 assists versus USC. Aaliyah Edwards, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist versus the Trojans. I mean, those two were the 1-2 punch on a UConn team that is very, very banged up, has suffered a lot of injuries, been through so much adversity, and yet those two really, really stepped up for this team. And those are the 2 that ultimately got it done for UConn to send them to the Final Four. So shout out to both of those players. Zion, who you got?
Yeah, my game ball goes to Camila Cardoso. I mentioned I was at that IU game, and she was the best player on the court. Against another All-American center, Mackenzie Holmes. She showed out 22 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, which she did a great job. She wasn't making any ridiculous passes necessarily, but just getting it out of that double team quickly and finding the open the open teammate. She did a great job. She also had 3 blocks in that game and got Mackenzie Holmes in early foul trouble, which really ended up hurting IU. I think, if I remember correctly, IU was +5 in the minutes that Holmes was on the court and -9 in the 7 minutes or 7 or 8 minutes that Lily Meister, the backup center, was on the court. So getting Mackenzie Holmes in foul trouble probably won South Carolina that game when you look at it that way. So she did a great job in that game. Nothing special. It was kind of a balanced effort they had in the Elite Eight against Oregon State, just 12 points and 9 rebounds. But I really just wanted to shout her out and say Kamilla Cardoso, she plays like one of the best centers in the country consistently. She doesn't have the big numbers of, of maybe Mackenzie Holmes or Cameron Brink or Reagan Beers, any of these other centers she goes against. But when she goes against them, when they play one-on-one, pretty much everyone but, I think, Alyssa Peely in Utah, they played in November or December. Pretty much everybody but her, Kamilla Cardoso plays better than when they go against each other one-on-one. So shout out to her, and she's going to be big for South Carolina this week if they want to win their second national championship in 3 years.
The best adjective I should give to Cardoso is just like anchor. I feel like she's just your anchor in the paint.
Yeah.
She just credit to everything that you just said. Great performance facing up against Mackenzie Holmes, and then a balanced performance against Oregon State. I agree with you that she was definitely the best player on that court against IU.
Well, we'll move on to the flop of the Elite Eight. I'm going to go first on this one, and then I'll hand it over to the 2 men to my right. But USC, Zion and I both got very funny first points here that you'll hear from him when he gives his flop. This was my national championship pick. I really, really thought this young squad of talent, led by Juju Watkins, could get it done, and it would have been the start of the dynasty. But 23-70 from the field. They forced 12 UConn turnovers, though, but they rushed a lot of their possessions down the stretch, and ultimately that's what kind of led to their downfall. I spoke on it earlier. They were 9-29 from 3. They forced up several contested shots, and even at the end of that game, UConn was still trying to keep a minute with the amount of free throws that they were missing. Like, I think at one point they missed 7 free throws in a row. Down the stretch, UConn did.
And they were 7. They missed 10 total in that game. That's terrible.
Yeah. So UConn did their best to try and keep SC in that game, but yeah, Southern Cal just, the inexperience showing, the young talent that they have. They're going to be back. This team's going to be better and better as they develop this squad of talent, as Juju Watkins continues to refine her game. Really, really excited to see what this team does the next 4 years with this group of women. But yeah, they're my flop of the Elite Eight. Southern Cal goes down to UConn.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that we get to see USC in Assembly Hall next year.
Yes,
absolutely. That would be really cool.
That would be incredible.
So hopefully they come here and IU doesn't have to go all the way out there.
Yeah. Or at least a home and away, right?
Maybe. I don't know if they would, because they only get like 2 or 3 like home and aways now with how big the conference is going to be.
Sure.
So we'll see how that plays out. I'll go to my flop. Pac-12, you're really letting us down here. Mine is Stanford. Just like you, this was the team I had in the national championship. I just patted myself on the back a couple minutes ago. Last week I came on here and I was like, I really like the fact that Stanford got that close game against Iowa State out of the way. I think now they're going to be poised in the tournament. No, I was wrong. They lost in the Sweet 16 at NC State. Man, I don't know. I just felt like I looked at that region. I said, Texas is the weakest number 1 seed. Stanford's probably the best number 2 seed. And I looked at that region and I said, okay, I think they can get out of this. Then we set up Cameron Brink versus Kamilla Cardoso in the Final Four, and maybe they win that, and then they can win the net. No, none of that happened. So that was on me. Brink played really well in that game against NC State. She had 7 blocks on defense, but only scored 13 points on offense, and she fouled out for the 2nd straight game. That's an issue. Kiki Iriafen, who I knew she was kind of poised for a breakout year coming into the season. They talked about it a lot during the offseason. I just didn't expect her to really become their number 1 option in the way she did kind of down the stretch. But she had a good 26-point game, but she only played 23 minutes because she had 4 fouls. So it was really a disappointing end to the season for this Stanford team and for the end of Cameron Brink's career. She's going to the WNBA, but props to NC State. Like we already talked about it. No one expected them to be here, and they're here. So props to them, and Stanford, you are my flop of the week.
Poor Pac-12.
Yeah.
None in the women's
conference that started out
so
deep. They were so deep and so stacked.
If you had told me in February that none of those teams were going to make the Final Four out of the Pac-12, I would have not believed you.
Called you crazy.
But somehow none of them got there.
Yeah.
No in the women's Final Four. No in the men's Final Four. Washington chokes in the NCAA championship in football. I mean, you can't get anywhere.
By the way, shout out to Elias Curry, who last night
shout out Elias.
His Indiana State men's Sycamores ended Pac-12 basketball forever. They beat Utah, and that is the end of Pac-12 basketball. That was the last game.
Rest in peace, Pac-12.
That's going to be like the Pac-6, maybe.
It's the Pac-2 right now. I think it's Washington State and Oregon State are the final two that have not declared. But I digress. Moving on to my flop of the week. I really don't like doing an individual player because I don't want to be that kind of person.
But you're doing it.
But you're doing it anyway.
I'm sorry, but Hailey Van Lith's defense just was not very good. I don't think she should have been guarding Caitlin Clark in the first place. I think that was discussed across many different platforms. But the shooting numbers, 9 points, 2 of 10 from the field, 106 from 3. I think the best description that someone put, I think the lights were just too big. I think maybe at that stage and with that team, maybe just not her in her comfort zone. I will say she did not play up to her level, but LSU as a whole, just their second chances, it was also pretty bad. 23 offensive rebounds and rebounded Iowa by 18. That's a huge margin. That's like, I mean, that's a big margin. And moments
and they didn't capitalize.
You could see like in the game, there was moments where they were right there and you were just like, get in the bucket. Just put it on the glass and put it in the bucket. Like it was bad. LSU, they had the opportunity. I think that's safe to say. They definitely had the opportunity, but the defense with Hailey Van Lith and just the second chance points, I think maybe a tougher way to go out as a team.
I agree. Again, those are our flops of the Elite Eight. We'll move on. We got a quick bonus segment for you. We're going to breeze through these next couple segments, but we do want to note them. First of all, we got some news and some controversies to talk about. First of all, there is a debate going on right now to get rid of the home court advantage in the first 2 rounds of the women's tournament next year and just make them neutral site games just like the men's tournament. Gentlemen, your overall thoughts on this debate right now?
Want to start when we start?
I'll take it. I'm not against it. I mean, I'm fine with it. It's just like the men's tournament. So, I mean, and you're not changing anything on the grand scheme of things. Like it's not something new. It's just switching the women's tournament more towards the men's tournament. I don't really know why when the women's tournament came around, or if there was like a rule change in the midst of why they had the host sites as those colleges.
I don't know the years here. Let me try to do some research here. At one point they did do neutral. Okay. And then they switched for the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. I'm not too sure on the reason for that in my own, knowledge and research, but I think it's fine. I am curious to see why they're doing it now.
Right.
And I think that maybe a question. I think, I guess an argument you can make is maybe, the women's basketball has taken a much bigger leap than maybe some have expected the past few years. And they're just trying to be on that even playing field with men's college basketball. So maybe that's an argument, but overall, I'm fine with it. I don't think controversy. It may be controversial for some different reasons that I'm not aware of, but overall, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think for me, like I kind of agree with you. I'm kind of just on the fence. I'm not really too passionate one side or the other. Yeah. The one thing I will say is I will miss, like, for example, there was a Virginia Tech game that was played against Baylor. I believe, it was the Virginia Tech Baylor game, and that Virginia Tech arena was on fire. And I think that's the one thing that's going to be missed is really like the fire and passion of a stacked home crowd going against an away team, basically, is what it's going to be. I think I'll miss that energy, but if they do end up doing the neutral site games, I think that energy will be a lot more balanced, which I'm also fine with. I'm not really torn either way.
And sorry, before you go, Zion, I'm curious maybe if there was any conversation in transitioning the men's back to collegiate host sites. I think that could have been a little fun on my end, but I guess that's just my 2 cents on the matter.
So, I did find that from 2003 to 2014, they were predetermined sites for first and second round games. So it's basically been a decade now, 10 years since they've gone back to the teams playing at home if you're a top 4 seed. So they tried it, and then they decided to go away from it. Obviously, we're in a different space 10 years from where we were 10 years ago. Excuse me.
Sure.
But honestly, I'm okay with the home sites. I like the environments. I like just watching those rowdy moments and whatnot. And it really just depends on how much of a chance we think mid-major teams have. You know, like a team like Middle Tennessee, who they were the 11th seed. They upset Louisville. And do we think that maybe if that game wasn't at LSU, they could have beat LSU? Maybe, but I don't know. You know, so I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes right now.
It's tough to tell. Yeah,
it's tough to tell. So I'm okay with the way it is right now. It kind of goes into my shot clock, which I have later. I'm a little bit all right with some things between the men's and women's game being different, and this is one of those things where I think it's fine that we have these home sites for the first couple rounds.
Well, we'll move on and highlight the WNIT Final Four and Championship briefly. Owen, I'm going to let you take this one, and Zion and I will kind of chime in with a couple little other thoughts, but just kind of want you to lay that out for a couple minutes, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so I think the Final Four is Minnesota, Vermont, Troy, and St. Louis.
So it's tonight. St. Louis plays Vermont, and Minnesota plays Troy.
Yeah. So I personally, I think it's Minnesota's to lose. I think being a Big Ten team, but also Amaya Battle leads them in many different categories. She's been exceptional just in like postseason play in general. She had a very good couple of games in the Big Ten tournament, has transitioned that into the WNIT. So I think it's theirs to lose. If I had to pick a team that would beat Minnesota, I think it would be Vermont. It's on the opposite side of the bracket, so that would be a championship matchup if Minnesota and Vermont were to win. They beat Purdue earlier in the tournament, so at the very least, it says you can compete with kind of that high-level kind of team. And then Emma Utterback for them also leads them in a lot of categories, points per game and assists. Two guard matchup that I think that could be a good matchup in the final. One thing I do want to highlight, the WBIT, the Women's Basketball Invitational Tournament, Illinois has a chance to become the champion of that one in the final. They play
Big Ten represent.
So you're telling me we come out of this weekend
Illinois
with 3 Big Ten national champions?
We could.
This is true.
It's possible.
This is true.
This might be good for my agendas.
Yeah, exactly. Hey. Yeah. So shout out to the Big Ten.
Real quick, just kind of want to add to your point, Owen. Yeah, this is a Minnesota team that has shown glimpses this past season, especially for what they're capable of, and that would be huge for their program if they're able to win that tournament. Zion, anything to add before we move on?
Not much. I do think maybe I am biased, but I think Minnesota's going to come out on this one. Sorry to the 3 kind of lower mid-major schools that are in that Final Four for the WNIT, but I'm going to go with the Gophers here. So best of luck to everybody in that.
Well, we'll move on to the Pure Cinema segment, the favorite storyline that you guys are looking forward to seeing play out in the Final Four. Your picks and your predictions. Zion, you're up first.
Do I just start with my storyline?
Start with your storyline, and you can do picks and predictions. Yeah.
I just talked about it, how Paige Beckers, for much of that game, defended Juju Watkins. You know where this is going, right? Like, I want to see Paige Beckers for most of this game on Friday guarding Caitlin Clark. That is what I want to see. I know Caitlin Clark probably won't be guarding her on the other end. We just... You know, Caitlin Clark, I don't want to call her a bad defender, but you're not going to just put her on the other team's best player. She's not at that level. I want to see, though, especially if it comes down to it and there's 8 minutes left or whatever, even if she doesn't do it for the first 3 quarters, I want to see Beckers checking Caitlin Clark up the court and trying to see if she can stop her to get to the national championship game. I know it's basic. It's not like super analytical. I just want to see it. So that is what I'm looking forward to on Friday night. That is what I want to see most. Do I go straight to my picks now?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll go with the easier one first. Great season, North Carolina State. I just don't think they can score enough to beat South Carolina. I really don't. You know, you look at a team like IU or even Oregon State, who was in that game for a while. Those are 2 teams that score the ball a lot. I don't think a defensive-oriented team like NC State is going to be able to hang enough points on South Carolina. So I do think the Gamecocks get back to the national championship. On the other end, man, I've been thinking about this for days. Which team I'm picking?
It is very tough.
That's going to be such a good game.
It is.
Yes.
And I think I'm going with the Huskies.
Yeah.
I'm at the point now where I don't disagree with you.
I don't want to keep underestimating this team. I don't want to keep saying, oh, they're good, but not national champion good.
But which team do you think's more tailored to beat South Carolina?
a team that shoots more threes because that's what Oregon
That's
State and Indiana.
That's the
Indiana
thing.
what
did.
I-
Sorry,
went
I
to South
interrupted you,
Carolina
but I'm
last
just
year.
Right.
I interrupted you, but go ahead. Like I'm just posing the
Yeah.
deep thought questions, you know?
Yeah, oh my goodness. I think I agree with
know.
Owen. Like,
Yeah.
just because I've seen it, right? We
Sure.
saw it last year in the Final Four because,
Sure.
and obviously South Carolina's a way different team than they were last year. They're much better at shooting threes than they were last year, but they still don't shoot a lot compared to some other teams, compared to Iowa specifically.
Yes.
So I think Iowa's probably better built and better tailored to beat them. However, UConn has played them. It was without Camila Cardoso, and they still lost. So that might tell you something.
Yeah.
But they
But
have.
this is a different UConn team too.
Right, they're
Yeah.
different than they were when they played. I think that was like early February, but I do think Iowa's better fit to play them, but I don't think that's what we're going to see. I think it's going to be South Carolina and UConn, and I'll hold off on my pick until after.
There we go. Owen, you're
That's
up.
not fair.
Your favorite storyline, and then
That's
your
not
picks
fair.
to go into the championship game, and then we'll all say our winners.
Look, this has been a very historic season for Caitlin Clark, and
Mhm.
nothing needs to be taken away from that. She's got all the attention in the world right now in the space of women's college basketball. But just think of how like under the radar and maybe a little bit out of the spotlight South Carolina's undefeated season. Keep that in mind. Undefeated season.
That means
has
they haven't
gone.
lost, right?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
thank you. I just
think.
had to get it right.
Yes. Undefeated. Undefeated, like LeVar Ball said, undefeated, never lost in this season.
Never lost.
Never lost. Okay. This is a team that can really, I hate it because if they get to the national championship against Iowa and they win, people are going to be shocked for some reason. Like there will be a few select amount of people that are shocked that they beat Iowa, and that's just because of how much attention that team has gotten. Which, granted, again, fully deserved. Don't want to cause any ruckus there, but I really think if that final happens, again, the 3-point shooting is something that you have to take into consideration. But if South Carolina takes it all the way, I think it may shock a lot of people. But I think the most entertaining final to me will be South Carolina and Iowa. I don't know if Iowa gets there. I think South Carolina for me is a lock. But I'll have to wait and see with that UConn and Iowa game. Excuse me.
Hey, you're good, man.
Yeah.
Hey,
Wait, but is
happens all the time.
Iowa your
So
official
is,
pick?
Is Iowa your pick on the
My
other end?
official pick?
What's your official pick to
Gotta
be in
have
the
a pick, Owen.
championship game? Yeah.
I will go Iowa.
Okay.
I'll go Iowa
Okay.
to just kind of even it out. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll real quickly jump into mine before we get into our championship winners. My favorite storyline: can a banged up but experienced UConn team bring home another title for this blue blood program? English is hard sometimes. This is a team that a lot of people had questions about through the majority of the season, and they've just answered all those questions and passed every test with flying colors. They beat a USC team that was ranked above them, that was seated higher than them, that honestly probably had more overall talent than this UConn team did. But this is a UConn team that doesn't really make a whole lot of mistakes. They're very, very sound on a lot of different areas. They're led well by Paige Beckers. So my picks in the championship game: South Carolina. Sorry, NC State. It's 0-3 from us over here on the flop warning. But
see,
there's no
I
way.
want to look
Yeah,
at it
no,
and say
absolutely.
maybe if this I
Yeah.
just don't see it.
Watch them.
So South Carolina is also locked in for me. And I say UConn's defense tightens up and Iowa's season comes to an end. So I've got UConn versus South Carolina in my championship game. And I'll kick off our picks. UConn revenge game, and they win the championship and hand South Carolina their one and only loss of the season in the very last game of the season. Zion, you're up.
So that would be UConn avenging the 2022 title where South Carolina beat them there. Okay. So I have that same national championship game. I do think that this time South Carolina wins it. I don't want to say it'd be a disappointment if they didn't, but like if they do lose this weekend, you say, okay, like they've had these great seasons. They've lost 3 times in the last 3 years. If you lose 3 times in 3 years, you should, or it'd be maybe 4 if they lost again. But you feel like you should have more than one national championship to show for it. And I think that's kind of how those players like Cardoso and all those players that have maybe been there for a few years now think about it too. Like we want more than just that 2022. Of course, they won back in 2017 with AJ Wilson too, but that has nothing to do with really anybody on this team, right? So I think they want to be able to say, hey, we've been great for these 3 years, and we want the record books to show that too. I do think that they beat UConn in the national title for their second chip in 3 seasons.
All right, Owen, you have South Carolina and Iowa.
Yeah.
So we've got one UConn, one South Carolina. You're up.
Give me Iowa.
Wow, he's going to pick the Hawkeyes.
I know I just had a full segment on saying, hey, if South Carolina wins, maybe people are going to be shocked. And hey,
here's the thing.
They could be, but
I think they're the best tailored team to beat South Carolina.
Probably.
You can't disregard Caitlin Clark. You just can't. It's like when I don't know. My first thought that comes to mind is the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. You can't bet against Patrick Mahomes.
I have a very similar feeling.
Exactly.
When I watch Caitlin Clark, I'm like,
you just can't.
You know it's coming, and there's nothing you can do.
Exactly. If SC takes it all the way, maybe people are just gonna be a little bit shocked about that. But I don't see it going anywhere else. I think if this is the year, it all sets up for the storyline. Caitlin Clark's final year at Iowa, she breaks the scoring record. If she gets the national title, she's gonna take it. I'm gonna pick Iowa.
Either way, we've got 2 and then one more, so 3. Nice math there. Very, very interesting, incredible, amazing, immaculate, electrifying games to end us off for the 2023-2024 season. We'll move on to our last segment real quick. It's time for Shot Clock. Owen, you're going to be up first. And again, for those that don't know, or if it's your first time watching Flop Warning, first of all, thank you for coming on the pod and listening to us. How it works is we each have 30 seconds, so a shot clock, to say or rant about anything and everything that we want. And this was patented by our very own Elias Corey, who's in our class right now. It's our favorite segment on the show. Owen, you are up first, my friend. I'll go ahead and pull out the timer here.
I have a lot of capital letters.
A second. Yeah, I know. You're like typing like the shouting text.
I've been pretty sane this episode. We'll see if I raise in volume.
Okay. So, all righty. You are rolling in 3, 2, 1. Take it away.
What are these host sites? I mean, no one wants to play in Albany and Portland. I mean, come on. And if it can't get any worse, you have to go to a city of losers and play in Cleveland for the Final Four.
15 seconds.
Is this really the best option? Top 10 things to do in
10
Albany.
seconds.
Number 1, leave. In Portland, number 1, leave.
5
These
seconds.
are boring. No one wants to see them. No one wants to go there.
3, 2,
it's dumb.
1. Time. He got the shot off. Man, oh my, oh me.
It is.
Thank you.
It
You
is
know,
dumb.
that was amazing. Give me a high five over the top
so
here.
dumb.
Yeah.
No one wants to go to Albany, New York, and Portland, Oregon. Are you serious? You have got to be kidding me.
Here's what I'll
my
say.
gosh.
I've never been to Portland. I've never been to Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
I've now been to Albany twice. I completely agree. Please, Albany residents, please don't kill me. There's not much to do. It's not a great
our own
The
Luke
one
Donovan
thing-
just said clip Owen's shot
The
clock.
the one thing that you do in Albany is get a pair of binoculars and
Bird watch.
be sad and cry. that
apparently
you-
the museums are really cool. I didn't go though.
What kind of museums?
I don't know. It's
of
the
art?
state-
Museums
it
of
is
art,
the state
maybe?
Capitol, so they have the Capitol building too. Once again, I didn't go there. I didn't really care all that much to go, but maybe it's cool. But other than that, I walked around a lot more last year when I thought maybe there was something to do, and there wasn't. And then this year I didn't even try.
It's also like it's
was
on
awful.
the two complete opposite sides of the map.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are we doing?
It rains in Oregon. No one
Yeah.
wants. That's just so gloomy. Like,
I know.
imagine you're showing up, you like travel like thousands of miles, and you get to Portland, and it's raining. It's raining, and it's just
yeah,
ugh.
that really sets the mood, right?
Yeah, it's always raining in Oregon. No one wants.
So anyway, I'll
Outrageous.
move on.
Outrageous.
Completely agree with you, Owen. I'll move on to my shot clock. I'll go
time
ahead.
you here.
Okay, let me know when I'm going.
3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Okay, there needs to be a system in place or something where it shortens the duration of the end of basketball games. Here's some ideas for you. Maybe no officials challenge inside of 2 minutes, like no coaches challenge inside of 2 minutes in football. I don't know. After the 2 minute mark, coaches are limited to only 2 timeouts. Something. I'm so tired of commercial after commercial. There's no need for games to last over 2 hours long because of the last 3 minutes of basketball games. On the topic of officiating, what has been going on with this tournament and officiating? Fix this. It's the March Madness tournament.
There we go. You had some time to spare there, Riley.
That was tough.
I agree. I literally had that same shot clock on a men's show earlier this year,
Yeah.
and I completely agree. Like, please, like, I hate watching a game, and it's like 12 minutes for the last 2 minutes of action.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
There's been multiple times where they come back from a commercial break. It's like one play, ball goes out of bounds, and you're right back to commercials.
Yeah.
And the Buffalo Wild Wing, the Buffalo is just knocking everything
I love
over
the
in the
Buffalo,
restaurant.
by the way, but
That
like
is-
I don't want to
that's
see
been my-
it 5
I don't wanna
times at the
see
end of a
it 5
game.
times.
Yeah.
Let's
go to the
fourth bar. Oh my gosh. Gets annoying
That
after
was
a
a
while.
flag. All right, Zion, you're going to close us off here on the show. Your shot clock. Are you ready, my friend?
I am.
All right, 3, 2, 1, send it.
Can we please stop talking about women's college basketball only in relation to the men's game?
Yes.
I hate when I see a tweet that's like, I love watching Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and I don't know anybody in the men's game. Why is there the need to do that? Just say you love watching these players. If you don't
15
watch the men's
seconds.
game, don't talk about it. You know, who cares, right? It's cool. But I just hate the fact that we act like these
10
two
seconds.
things are exclusive. Like you can only like one at a time. Watch both if you do. Watch one if you only
5
watch both.
seconds.
But don't talk about the other just to talk about
2,
one. It's ridiculous.
Got the shot up.
That was perfect.
Everybody is under time today.
There we
I
go.
think that's one of our best shot clock segments that we've had. But yeah, you can be a fan of both, but like you don't need to compare. You
It's
know what I mean?
ridiculous.
Like
I don't get
you
it.
don't.
It's college basketball.
Yes.
Like that should be the idea here. It's
Yeah.
it's a little outrageous.
You can't compare like you don't be comparing like football to track. You
Or
know what I mean?
you know
I know
what
that's
I'm
not the
saying?
same
Yeah,
thing.
no,
I
right,
understand,
no,
but like
I
yeah,
get what you mean. They're
Yeah.
the same game, but different sports.
Right.
That's how I
Yes.
like to say it.
yes, yeah.
And the other thing I hate, I don't know if this counts as me extending my shot clock,
No, it's
but
fine.
like the tweets that are like, oh, the tickets for the women's Final Four are way more expensive than the men's. The men's are playing in a football stadium. This is not the
Exactly.
same.
Yeah.
It's not
Yes.
the same thing. Obviously, the women's tournament, they're getting a bigger draw. Like the TV numbers show it. So like, I'm not
Mhm.
saying that they wouldn't be if they were both playing in a football stadium, but like, we can't try to act like it is the same because
Right.
it's not. It's just not. Once again, same game, different sports.
yeah, completely agree. Well, hey, this has been really, really fun.
Yes.
Oh, and Zion, this has been an incredible day of on the Wednesday pod talking about women's basketball. The Final Four, again, it's South Carolina, NC State, and then Iowa and UConn. Those games are going to be so fun. You're going to be needing to start making your popcorn now. And also go to the store and get some groceries if you're here in Bloomington because it's
Oh,
Eclipse
gosh.
time on Monday.
Eclipse.
So just so we know. Well, speaking of Eclipse, we will be live on Sunday around not the same time. It's probably going to be a little bit later in the day. Keep an eye on our socials for times and news of when we're going to be on. But we're going to be doing a show remotely on Sunday. We'll have some of our crew on where we will be previewing the men's championship game a day early because of the eclipse. So again, Sunday, not Monday, around maybe around 3, 4, 5 o'clock, somewhere in there. Again, keep an eye on our social medias. And you're going to get the entire breakdown of the 2024 NCAA Men's Basketball Championship game. That's all for us today. Thanks to our producer, Leah Blosser, for keeping us on the air and, making sure that we sound good and all those amazing things. Thank you for your help. Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate you being on our show. For Owen Graham and Zion Brown, I'm Riley Woodall. Have an amazing day, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week. God bless.